Turn off the mower. I need to talk to you.
Officer, that's the man I called about. He's been moving things around her property.
I'm just clearing the yard for her.
Officer, please let him finish.
Who is he? We've never seen him around here before.
He's a stranger, but he's willing to help me without asking for anything in return.
When Mrs. Ruth told me somebody important was coming the next morning, I assumed it was family. Then she looked at me and said, "No, but part of her son lives in my daughter." Ruth was 79 years old, walked with a cane, and hadn't been able to maintain her yard since injuring her hip. The grass was knee-high, weeds had covered the walkway, and bushes were closing in around the porch. A neighbor saw me moving old chairs and called police because he thought I didn't have permission to be there. Ruth quickly explained that she had asked me to help. Then she told me why tomorrow mattered so much. Her daughter, Jennifer, was 48 and had been born with a heart condition. For most of her life, she managed it with medication and surgeries. But 2 years earlier, her heart began failing badly. Eventually, doctors told the family she needed a transplant. Ruth said those months were the hardest of her life. Every time her phone rang, she hoped it was the hospital. Every time it wasn't, she felt guilty for being disappointed because she knew what that call would mean. Somewhere, another family had suffered an unimaginable loss. Then, one night at 2:14 in the morning, the call finally came. A heart was available. Jennifer survived the surgery. She slowly regained her strength. She could walk farther, sleep without struggling to breathe, and eventually visit her mother again. For months, they knew almost nothing about the donor. Then Jennifer wrote a letter through the transplant organization thanking the family whose decision had saved her life. Several months later, she received a reply. The donor was a 31-year-old man named Daniel who had died suddenly after an accident. His mother, Mrs. Karen, had made the decision to donate his organs. Over time, the two families exchanged letters. Eventually, Karen asked one question. Would Jennifer be comfortable meeting her? Jennifer said yes. Karen was coming to Ruth's house the next morning because Jennifer wanted somewhere quiet and private for their first meeting. Ruth told me, "That woman lost her boy, and because of what she did, I didn't lose my girl." Then she started crying. She wanted the house to feel welcoming, but after her hip injury, she could barely walk through the front yard herself. Jennifer had told her not to worry about it. Ruth worried anyway. "I know grass doesn't matter," she said, "but I don't know what you say to a mother who gave your family more years." So I told her she didn't need perfect words or a perfect yard, but we could at least give everyone a safe place to sit. I cleared the walkway first, then mowed the front lawn, trimmed the bushes, opened the porch, and cleaned a little sitting area beneath the tree. Ruth brought out 3 chairs. Then she went back inside and returned carrying a small stethoscope. She held it like it was fragile. Jennifer's transplant nurse had given it to her for the meeting. Karen had asked if she could hear her son's heart. Ruth whispered, "I haven't stopped thinking about that sentence." The next morning, Jennifer arrived first. She looked healthy, but when Ruth handed her the stethoscope, her hands started shaking. At 11, a car stopped at the curb. A woman in her 60s stepped out slowly. Karen stood at the end of the newly cleared walkway and stared at Jennifer. Jennifer walked toward her. Neither woman seemed to know whether to hug. Finally, Karen said, "You must be Jennifer." Jennifer nodded and answered, "And you must be Daniel's mom." That was all it took. They hugged. Karen cried immediately. Jennifer did too. Ruth stood behind them with one hand over her mouth. After they sat down, they talked about Daniel. He loved terrible action movies. He never folded laundry. He called his mother every Sunday, even when he had nothing to say. Jennifer laughed and said, "That explains why I suddenly hate folding towels." Karen laughed harder than anyone expected. Then the moment came. Jennifer handed her the stethoscope. Karen placed it against Jennifer's chest. Everyone went quiet. She moved it slightly until she found the sound. Then she froze. Her eyes closed. For several seconds, nobody moved. Finally, Karen whispered, "That's him." Jennifer started crying. Karen listened a little longer, then pulled the stethoscope away and touched Jennifer's shoulder. She said, "Take care of it." Jennifer answered, "I will. I promise." Ruth couldn't hold herself together anymore. She walked over and hugged Karen. "Thank you for not letting me lose my daughter," she said. Karen shook her head and answered, "Daniel would have wanted somebody to stay." Even the neighbor who had called police was standing quietly across the street. Later, he came over and apologized to Ruth. She simply said, "You saw somebody cleaning a messy yard. You didn't know what we were getting ready for." Before Karen left, she asked if there was somewhere she and Jennifer could plant something together. Ruth pointed toward the backyard. There was an old flower bed back there, but nobody had reached it since her hip injury. Karen looked at Jennifer and said, "Maybe something that comes back every year." I looked through the gate at the waist-high weeds and picked up my trimmer. Comment next if you want to see what these two families planted together in Daniel's memory.